Hi, Filipina Waverbod here. I'm not on a camera this time. I'm sick. But since it's my weekly story time, I don't want to let you down. So today, we have a story that's a bit darker than my normal vlogs. I'm going to tone this down a bit from how it was originally presented to me, just to make sure that this video won't get demonetized. This story comes from one of the cases or stories that a CFO officer shared, during my training prior to coming to the US. The CFO stands for Commission on Filipinos Overseas. This is a government agency that provides training prior to the departure of a Filipino going abroad. So, this case revolves around a woman in her late 20s, born in a province in the Philippines. She got married in her late teens. Her husband was also from the same area and was a bit older than she was. He was physically and emotionally abusive to his young wife. So, after a couple of years, of this horrible marriage, the Filipina packed her few possessions and she went to Angeles City, where a distant cousin had been working for several years there. This young woman cut off her communication from anyone from her province, including her family, to try to avoid her husband finding her. She worked in various bars at Angeles City and she did some freelance work on the side. She spent 4 years in a city where she dated hundreds and hundreds of men. So by her mid 20s, she became streetwise and developed a strong sense of distrust for all men. She was a smart girl and she knew that the path she was on was only gonna lead to loneliness and despair. So she decided to run away once again and left everything she'd built in Angeles City and started fresh in Cebu. She'd saved quite a bit of money during her time working in Angeles City, and with this money, she opened a small souvenir shop near the beach resorts in Cebu. Meanwhile, she discreetly reached out to her 6 year younger sister and she asked her if she could use her documents and ID to start fresh in Cebu and also continue hiding from her ex husband. She was happy with her new life, and while the souvenir shop didn't make much money, it was enough for her to live comfortably. One day, an American in his mid 50s stopped by the souvenir shop and he spent the afternoon flirting. The man seemed genuinely interested in her and he asked her out for dinner that evening. The two had a great dinner date and the man asked her out again the next night and then every night for the next several weeks. This American was working in Cebu for a couple of months, and during this period, he asked a Filipino to marry him and come to the US. The Filipina agreed. Many of you might say, of course. Well, now the girl had continued to deceive the man. She was living under her sister's name, telling the man she was 6 years younger than what she really was, and she was single and never had been married. The Filipina had never loved this man. After working in the bars in Angeles City, she was unsure if she could ever love a man again. All she wanted that time was to escape from her life in the Philippines and to immigrate to the US. This was her opportunity. Being streetwise and quite intelligent, she realized that once she was in the US, she could claim to be abused and trafficked. So, what she did was, she developed a plan where she would ask to borrow the man's cell phone and she would send messages to and from his phone to make it seem like it was his idea to use her sister's name so she could come to the US. And once in the US, she could work in strip clubs and bars to repay him. She also sent threats from him to imply that she was in danger if she did not comply. When she sent the messages, she would delete them on the American's phone, but would save them on her phone and computer too. This American was clueless that this was happening. Eventually, the K1 visa was approved. The Filipina traveled to the US using her sister's identity as her own. While in the US, she and the American struggled to get along. He found the Filipina to be distant and not affectionate. After a month, the Filipina reported to the Philippine embassy that she was being trafficked and needed help escaping from this American. The police soon arrived, and the Filipina explained who she really was and how she was forced to come to the US. She gave the police her phone with all the messages she'd sent herself from the American's phone. The American was arrested and placed in jail with a $250,000 bail, which he couldn't post. The woman was placed in a safe house, and legal services were made available to help her get a green card and stay in the US under her original name. Her plan had worked. Her American fiance was trialed, and while he claimed it was all a setup, he had zero collaborating witnesses. Having witnesses travel from the Philippines was impossible. And he was found guilty with a 10-year prison sentence. Eventually, his sentence was thrown out due to procedural issues, but by this time, he spent 3 years behind bars. The Filipina still had to make a living in the US, so she went to work in a strip bar. She worked there for a few years while she went to school to become a physical therapist. And also, she was able to divorce her first husband when she was in the US. Red flags, red flags, red flags. This Filipina gave off many red flags during her short courtship, but the American missed them or just assumed all Filipinas were sweet and make good wives. Do your research and make sure you meet the family before marriage. Tons and tons of videos these days that'll help you somehow avoid encountering Filipinas who have ulterior motive and not genuine love. Make sure she is who she says she is. But yeah, it's really hard to refuse a beautiful and young Filipina to a very lonely you. Thanks for watching today, guys, and make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already done so. I'll be back again next week with another interesting video. Bye. Oh my god, my voice, really, my throat hurts.